incorporate is that we wear our devices. Jacob, today I'm wearing my watch, my Apple Watch, for the first time since I bought it. I wore it for 2 days, put it back in the box. There were clearly issues with the watch that made it not so user-friendly. Apple has addressed those. Yesterday, all of our developers, in fact, most of our whole company, watched the presentation of the Apple Developer Conference, the first 30 minutes or so, that talked about the operating system, the new operating system, I think it's called Watch OS 3, which addressed a lot of those issues. And those are the things that we're going to talk about now. And this is for you as developers. It's also for anyone who's thinking about buying an Apple Watch and has not done it yet, but maybe thinking, we're waiting for the improvements to happen. Or maybe you are a business owner who is thinking about developing an app. We're going on flashcards today. We're trying to get the information out to you. They've improved the instant app launch. So now it's truly instant. When I click on an app on my watch, it comes right up. There was this huge delay. They talk about having different faces for different occasions, the ability to share your daily activities. So the watch time, if you look now, it's faster to find and launch your favorite apps, and they come up right away. You want to talk a little bit about this and what it means as developers?
Yeah, so I will say, to get the full understanding, definitely go to the documentation and watch some of the videos Apple gives themselves. For the recap, though, essentially what they're doing is that they're taking the information, like let's say you are looking at the weather on your phone, and your phone has to, fetch the information and then display it on the phone. For your watch to do that, what it's doing now, and the way that it can make it immediate, is that it takes the most recent data from your phone and it kind of holds on to it for a certain amount of time in the background on the watch, so that when you want to switch to it, it'll refresh like once every hour, but once you switch to it, it'll have an immediate response time instead of calling back to the phone to then call to the server and do the whole process. Instead, it just has that it's like it's held on to a session of that information, and so it's immediate.
You push the button and it loads instantly. On your phone, you certainly have the ability to push up from the bottom, and you have a little control center. We now have that, just like on iOS, we now have that on the Watch OS 3. Reply options. This was one of my biggest frustrations, was that everything was several clicks away. And now we have the great ability to just instantly respond. And they've added something that I think is pretty cool, which is the ability to not have to grab your phone out and type, but actually scribble, and that's what they call it, on the phone. So here, as you can see, they scribbled Starbucks and pulled it up. They've also added the ability for fireworks and confetti. They've also made invisible ink. You can also send sketches and send your own heart rate. I know you've been reading a lot about the APIs in the last 24 hours and how we can now integrate these features into the apps that we're building. Anything to say about this?
Well, I mean, on one hand, I do got to say, as a developer and looking at these new features, the scribble idea, I don't know if the video really showed. I think it did. But being able to just, the thought process around making a mark and having it recognize something, and then once it's recognized, save it there, and then go to the next one, and being able to just scribble, I think is a brilliant idea. It's definitely an issue that I had with these watches beforehand.
I can also imagine eventually being able to use the writing to integrate back into the phone, so that maybe you're drawing on your watch and it's drawing on the phone, something like that. I'm sure everyone else has great ideas too. We'd love to hear them. Watch faces. So from the developer standpoint, maybe this wasn't as sexy, but from a consumer's aspect, I like this. I like to see that there's now more options. Minnie Mouse, for example, now is on the phone with Mickey. And not only that, but you can match her outfits with the bands.
Yep.
We have a client called eBeacon. Their idea is so similar to this that we kind of took a breath when you could hear the silence in the room as we were playing the developers conference, and they heard this because you actually have a team of people working on this app and have been doing so for some time.
Yep.
And so their idea was pretty much from a mobile app that when someone gets in trouble, they can tap a button, or when there's a disaster that happens, they tap a button and it sends an alert out to their contacts. But also there's some other things that take place, such as notifying contacts, sending maps, doing a few other things that Apple didn't address. But we went from aghast to being very excited.
Yep.
Because at first we thought, Apple has stolen this idea, right? But then we went to, wait a minute, this is great, because now we can use some of this on the watch that we have on the phone.
Yeah.
So talk about this a little bit. And, SOS, by the way, is a function on your phone now that you can, I believe, tap your phone for 3 seconds or something like that, and the little 911 button will come up and make the call. Regardless of where you're at, it will call emergency services. Even if the number's not 911, it will send a message to your contact saying that you need help. It will notify emergency services, and it will send a location with a map of where you're at.
Yeah.
That's pretty much what SOS does, right? You want to...
So yeah, the app we're working on right now has a lot to do with how Apple is achieving this right now. I think that one of my favorite ideas is the 3-2-1 idea, and to be able to sort of bring those two together and connect this logic with what we currently have could make what we currently have even better. And it wouldn't be a clash of interests. It would just be increasing the user experience.
I think when we come to a place that we are working in tandem already before it was even launched, and now we see the possibility of pulling that and working with some of the projects that we already have. And that wasn't just true for this project. It was true for a number of projects that as we listened to some of these updates, we kind of went, and then we had to sink in and think that Apple is doing this so that we can use this for our clients.
Right.
They didn't just come out and say, we're going to make this great and be the only ones that use it. That wasn't what we got from this.
Yeah, the great thing about Apple is that when they make something like this, they have documentation for developers to use what they have figured out. Right. And so it really allows, they were saying in the keynote that there are now over 2 million apps on the App Store.
Wow.
And so what is pretty incredible about that is that you look at the ones that Apple has built itself, like the developers for Apple, maybe a couple hundred or some, but we only really see maybe 20 or 30.
One of the things that I loved about watching this, by the way, it was the largest conference that Apple had ever had. One of the things that I really enjoyed watching about this was sitting there and realizing that Apple was making itself better the same way that we do. We launch an app, we launch a website, we launch a product. We go back and we say to the client, we've accomplished your idea and we've worked together to get this far. And almost always we're on the same page that more things need to be done to make it better, to improve the functionality, the user experience, to just make it better.
Yep.
And I feel like we saw that with Apple this time, and I enjoyed that. I don't mind now that I didn't like my watch in the beginning, and I'm excited to try the new release. When a client contacted us about an app that we believe will be huge, and it's a great idea. And I'm going to be very careful because I don't want to say too much about this. But it will work with the activity monitor in a way that probably people have not considered. So, and he was thinking about a lot of what we do here is product or software to hardware kind of integration. And he was thinking about what kind of hardware he could use to integrate with this type of activity. And I think Apple nailed it with this because part of his activity, part of his app will involve competition and communication and comparisons. And Apple did that here by allowing people to actually compete against each other's activities and ask our sales team when there's competition. People tend to do better with activity, right? Ask development, the same. You pair people up all the time to do the same kind of thing. You want to talk just for a second about?
Yeah, so I think, again, this is another feature made by Apple that we can really take into a number of different ideas. The ability to share activity, I think, is truly incredible.
We were right on the tail of Apple on almost every app we're working on with the release of the new OS 3. We couldn't be more excited about this release. It
totally
fits with us perfectly. This is the one that made me warm and fuzzy. I liked the idea. We do a lot of, when we build a website, a mobile app, we think about user experience. We think about people who have disabilities, whether it's making sure that we have alternative tags to photos so that on a website so that screen readers can read them for visually impaired individuals. We're not forgetting people who have disabilities. In this case, they have addressed people who are in wheelchairs being able to still use the watch. And it was exciting to listen to the conference and learn about people who were using the watch, who were in a wheelchair, to be able to get the notifications right on their wrist without having to do a lot more movement to grab a phone, go to a computer. It's now even more exciting to learn that they have created a new algorithm. They've worked with some very big organizations to learn. They've really, I think, done this well. This screenshot here shows the different considerations of how people use a wheelchair. So it's not the same as me and you walking down the street. There are different motions that take place that they have to consider when you are in a wheelchair. And they really worked hard on this algorithm to make it something that I think benefits the world in a way that I had not even considered. Had you even thought about people in a wheelchair using an iPhone? I am embarrassed to say that I hadn't really thought about it.
Well, I think a lot of times we think about our own experiences, and so, if you don't have people in a wheelchair in your immediate,
or a client asking for
one.
one.
Exactly, then it's hard to think about that.
It makes me want to broaden our perspective when it comes to these. I know we do a lot here already, but the fact nobody here ever brought this to me or I ever thought about it is kind of embarrassing.
Right.
So I do want to really broaden our horizons when it comes to individuals who have disabilities. Really a great thing, though. It does the same kind of thing. It will telling you to stand up after you've been at your desk too long. It will tell you to roll, basically. Time to roll is, I think, what they call it. It's quiet your mind, relax your body, the Breathe app. And I'll play the video of how this kind of works. But it reminds you to take deep breaths and uses visuals. And if you don't want to use the visuals and you close your eyes, then the little tap that you feel on the back of your wrist when you're using the watch will keep you in sync of what you're of the
breathing.
Of the breathing. Yeah. Don't forget to breathe.
And the thinking about sort of a broader sort of life and what does it mean to have a watch on a person all the time. You're always connected. It is an extension of yourself, and in this case, you don't have to hold anything. It's just there. And so, more ideas thinking about what can you do in that kind of setting. What makes sense? What do you do naturally, even without technology on your wrist? But then, how could technology on your wrist benefit what you normally do either way? And I'm sure there's more ideas out there that we haven't thought about yet, and that maybe Apple hasn't thought about.
Maybe you'll think about them and bring them to us to build for you.
Yeah, but I mean, it's all exciting.
Yeah. The idea is that you can do more on your watch. Some of the things, and this also ties into a couple clients that we have that are integrating hardware and software related to smart devices. Being able to control and manage your home. We have a client now, and I'm sure he wouldn't mind me talking about it because there's plenty of devices out there. We have a client coming on board that he's like me. He has smart devices throughout his home, but there's now 5 apps on my phone. There's Hue lights, there's Philip, or there's Honeywell, there's I have 5 different. So it's faster now for me just to go and turn down the air conditioner on the wall, turn off the lights, and turn off the televisions and go to bed. Being able to have it all in one place, on my wrist, becoming part of my life. I leave the house, the door's locked, the lights go off, the temperature changes. Being able to be at work and see the camera inside of my home with the touch of a button on my television in my office. Integrating my life with my watch and the devices, that's huge. Why don't you talk about pay within apps? I mean, you could reload your gift cards and and add time to a parking meter and all those kind of things. But why don't you talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, so this is called Apple Pay is what they have. And I know in the past, before this release, a lot of developers have had issues with Apple Pay. When you look at pay, when it comes to APIs and setting up pay for clients and whatnot, for the most part, PayPal, Braintree, these have been the sort of the biggest as far as the easiest to develop, the most documentation. More clients are requesting Apple Pay to be in their projects. And so having more documentation on Apple Pay and having Apple spend some more time to make it easier for developers to incorporate is something I'm definitely eager to look for, eager to sort of dive into the details and figure out sort of what have they changed, what have they done to make it easier to incorporate. And I'm excited to get started. I definitely know we have at least 1 or 2 clients that
we can use this one.
Are requesting Apple Pay, yeah.
I love the next one. Unlock your Mac. I'm wearing my watch. I sit down on my computer. I don't have to put in my password.
What I love about all of this is that Apple has really looked at to each part of our life, whether it's home, whether it's being active outside, whether it's taking a breather and sort of trying to relax. They've built certain standard default libraries to interact with your watch for your phone. And so every time they do this, they make an ability for developers to mimic and to change. And so these are their APIs, essentially. And so, we look at, up here we have control accessories, which is the HomeKit-based APIs. We have the Apple Pay APIs, and we have the different Apple Watch display APIs.
And there are more, right? This is just There's short list.
A long list, and they're all visible on the Apple documentation.
Of course, we had a couple of questions that came up through Twitter. With if you want to just kind of address each one of these 2, I think that would be great.
Sure. Okay. So it looks like Andre says, excited for the briefing. As a hybrid app developer, how may the new APIs or releases help me? And he says, I don't use Swift. So
first of all, what's Swift?
Yeah. So generally with developing for Apple products, you use either Swift or Objective-C. These are the languages that the application Xcode, which is for the most part where you develop for Apple programs, those are the 2 languages that are supported. However, there are also hybrid options, meaning...
What's a hybrid option?
Meaning that, let's say you're a developer that knows JavaScript and a lot of sort of website languages, so HTML, CSS.
So I'm a developer that has been working on websites for the last 5 years.
Right.
That's what Andre's talking about here. He's been, he doesn't know Swift because it's another language to learn, and he's probably spent 5 years perfecting his web development skills.
Yeah.
So there is an in-between that allows him to still build these apps, and it's a hybrid kind of system. And his question is, if I don't write Swift, which is Apple's language,
Right.
and I'm using this hybrid in between system, will I be able to will I benefit from this new release?
Right. And so the cool thing is that you can actually take all of the releases that Apple has done, and there are, for many different hybrid programs, an ability to extend the library into using Objective-C within it. For the most part, all of these languages boil down to a common ancestor. And so essentially, get back to the language C and everything is available.
Sure. We hire a lot of developers who just come to us with C only, right? And then we we train them from there so that they're kind of working. You want to talk just a second about that?
Yeah, so many of our developers have a computer science background. And
computer engineers, basically.
Exactly. Yep. And so, a lot of these sort of simpler machine language options are there, and they are very similar across the board for different. But as you sort of get more to the more recent languages, for example, like Ruby or Python or whatnot, there are certain agreements that are made from a large group of developers for how to write code. Now, once you sort of get up to those pieces, they may be simpler to read, but they all still come from the same place. So if you need to move one from over here to over here, you can step back, go back to the sort of root language, and then sort of build up again.
Sure. To bring this down to a workable scenario, we have a group of developers, of course, that are always coming in, new developers here. They are computer engineers that write C. It was amazing to me how quickly they picked up PHP, another development language, in order to work on a project that was due in a weekend.
Yeah.
I mean, they learned PHP in a few days because they had that strong background, and that's kind of what our company is.
Right.
Where we think is the strong background that gets us. We can teach someone a language. We want that strong background. The next one, it says Apple released quite a lot of info. What are your favorite features as developers?
Yeah. Well, if it's for me, let's think about this. My favorite features. I definitely like the ability to scribble. I think that's probably one of my favorite features, where you can just make a mark and it saves it and then goes to the next one. I think that definitely unlocks a lot of. I know one issue with my competitor watch here is that when someone texts me, I see it, and I love being able to see it. However, the only options I have for responding are talk into it, which there's some issues with that. But if I could just, scribble on it, then I think that would make it a lot easier for me to
absolutely
use it.
For me, it's not necessarily a developer-related, and maybe that I'm not answering the question, but for me, it's a personal one. Being able to quickly respond to my messages. If anyone's been around me, my phone never stops. My text messages never stop. My notifications never stop. Being able to quickly respond and provide a response back in just a few clicks of a button, or just a click of a button, is not only important for me, but important for our team and our clients, where I can give that instant feedback that before I had to take the time to sit down and write something, or I can prioritize things a lot better. Colin, how about you? What is the feature that you like so far?
I really like the rings, and that now we can compete against our friends. I like the activity tracking a lot. I've gotten pretty into that recently just through my iPhone alone.
Yeah, I haven't. I started it and I loved it, and then I think the competition side of it will make it better for me too. I think that's pretty much the end of this. So every week here at ISO Developers, we have This Week in Digital Development, and Jacob and I come together and we either discuss a project that we're working on and how it might benefit you, or we discuss something that we've learned, or maybe an event that happened here. It's not always development. Often it is. but it's regarding our industry. We might talk about how to better market a business using an online digital platform. We might talk about a conference that we've been to or that we've seen, new hardware, software, or we may address how to solve a particular problem that we've found. So we hope you will come back and join us again with This Week in Digital Development.